Welcome, folks. I'm the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun, and with me, as always, my friend, the President, Lawrence Gervais. We're broadcasting from Calgary in Region 3 of the Metis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Metis Nation homeland. We would also like to acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. We would also like to say thank you to our First Nation friends, to the Métis settlements, and to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. We would also like to give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for the time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. And now, folks, let's get the wheel squeaking. Welcome, folks, to another exciting conversation from a Métis perspective. With me, as always, here on the squeaky wheel, my friend, Lawrence Gervais, the President, the Region 3 President, who represents the multitude of people from pretty much Red Deer down. And I can't remember, Lawrence, I think your number's something like, was it 14,000? Or was it?
No, we're hitting 15,000 now. 15,000.
Okay, good. Yeah. And I know we're still trying to find those people who are trying to learn how to identify and how to get their card. But we're here to help take you through that journey. And folks, I'm Ross Memphis Pambrun. I'm the CEO of the Memphis Group and always here with a smile and a positive note regarding trying to bring this conversation forward. Now, Lawrence, I know today we always thank our subscribers. We thank those people who listen. We thank all of them. We're all struggling to fight our way through this challenging time in the pandemic. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the region, because I know between you and me, we're going to talk a little bit of sports. We're going to talk some of the activities that are happening within our community. And I like the fact that we share our conversation as we move past and extend, not just in Calgary, not just in this region around all of the small towns and the Airdrie communities and such, but we try to find the whole region and we try to have conversation about the province. And as we have those conversations, we know that there's a relationship between our province, BC, as we move east. That whole connection, all of us as the Métis are trying to get a better understanding of where we're coming from, where we're headed, and what programs are available. So let's talk, Lawrence, a little bit about the stuff that's, of course, on everybody's mind. Where are we at when it comes to Calgary's vaccine clinic?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I know we had plans with AHS to kind of move it to April, but it just wouldn't hit the age range that we're looking at. If we open a clinic now with 50 plus, we would probably get pretty limited numbers because a lot of people have gotten their vaccinations already. So we really are waiting for that 35 age group before we really start putting in a clinic. And I know we have a proposed dates of May 8th or 9th and the 15th or 16th the week after. So either one of those will work for us, I'm sure. And then we'll have the 35 plus coming in.
Now, I was just reading, I think because Edmonton had theirs recently and very successful. I think almost close to 1,400 or 1,500 people had come through the door. And I think what a lot of our citizens, the people who listen to our podcast, our listeners, is we're trying to get an understanding, and it's a big challenge. Right now, the government just says, well, if you don't know, just call 811. I think if you look at our connection to the albertametis.com website, where we try to keep more updates happening, and on our metis3.org site of here are the available clinics. Connect with us because we want you to participate. We want you to come out. Whereas I struggled with it came to the provincial phone call numbers and how do you reach the individual who's going to be in scheduling to try and give you an idea. It is complicated, but I think that we have a strong membership of people who are connected to our community. I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But the thing with Region 3, we uncover out of the 4 zones for Alberta Health Services, we have 3 in our zone here. So we've had good practice now because we've helped coordinate the Red Deer Clinic, we've helped coordinate the Rocky Mountain House Clinic. And, I did, lend a little bit to what Edmonton was doing. But, with Regan at the helm, she's been doing a great job, I think, of coordinating these things. And now we're going to look at Calgary. We have a ton of volunteers already. that are just waiting for this clinic to happen and just to get it going. And, now we've already had a few clinics under our belt. Now there probably won't be a lot of hiccups when we start operating ours.
Well, and sometimes the hiccups that are the ones that present themselves are not things that we can control. For example, I think I'm 21 or 22 days past receiving my AstraZeneca shot. Now, I don't want anybody from AstraZeneca to try and sue the squeaky wheel here, but what was it now? About 10 days ago, they said, well, at your age, if you got AstraZeneca between this day and this day, you could potentially have some brain. You may have a stroke as a result of blood clots because, there are some questions out there, though they say it may be more female related issues that or gender that have negative effects, but we're not really too sure. Now I don't even know if I'm going to get the second shot of AstraZeneca or even if they will provide it, because they may say, well, at your age, you know what, we'd rather you take this shot. So even though we can keep good planning when it comes to time and scheduling and the right people on board, well, if all of a sudden the government just goes, sorry, we're not going to give that to anybody. Well, now we scramble again. Where are we going to get the other vaccines, which I think we're all familiar, the Moderna, the Pfizer, the ones that are the most common, the ones we hear about the most. But yeah, those are the hiccups.
Yeah, I think, what the major hiccup is supply, right? So, Canada has purchased, a certain amount, and are they getting it on time and, in a timely manner? That's the whole issue, right? I'm sure Alberta Health would rather have everybody inoculated on the same day, but, it just doesn't work that way. We have to wait for the supply to come first before we open it up to that. And the thing with AstraZeneca, I think once you have the shot, you'll probably get a second one. I don't think they're going to have a refusal on you.
I don't know. That's where I'm confused.
Yeah.
How
it is a little
we stopped.
Yeah, you're not at that age of 55, so.
Exactly. So they might say no. How we disperse hail clouds, right? Where they fly those planes in and then they seed it and that's what goes in to break down the hail clouds. Well, maybe they just fly planes over. And remember the days when you had that little army man and you could throw him up in the air and he floated down? Well, they should just fly over the province and just start dropping vaccination needles with a little card on it that says only one of these, and just poke her right here in your arm. I guess that might get most people done in a day, but yeah, that may be a unique way of trying to ensure that everybody gets the needle. I had the chance of going through with the nurses who very generously were very considerate, very thoughtful, and held my hand when they poked that needle in, and I didn't feel a thing. So our system, we're working, I think, as best we can, but I always appreciate the updates that come from the province.
Yeah. For me, I'm not too scared of needles, so I probably won't have anybody hold my hand, but definitely.
Well, you get Botox once a week, don't you? Isn't that what sort of keeps those that smile so rosy and those cheeks so bright?
Yeah.
Sports, Lawrence. Now, because it's a nice transition from talking about the vaccine, and we're going to come back to some more Métis things, but now we can talk about how challenging sports are. When you look at poor Vancouver and BC having a difficult time with, sort of third wave and such. Well, now I don't know if it's half of the Vancouver Canucks that are out.
Yeah, I think it's like 17 players, isn't it?
Yeah. And oh boy, and you watch the leagues, and a friend of mine coaches at a very high level in the WHL, and they're in a bubble in Kelowna. Well, darn if the other day that one team in the WHL had, I don't know what it was, 6 or 12 now confirmed positive cases. So there were 4 teams. Now 25% of that little organization is quarantining and isolating, and the other 3 are trying to manage. Same things happening at the NHL level, obviously, right? Montreal had a difficult time. We know baseball has gone up and down. Basketball, the same thing with the Raptors getting so beat up. But yeah, the cancellations. And let's talk baseball because the Blue Jays just played.
Yeah, they played in front of 40,000 fans in Texas. So
when you mention
Arlington,
that, 40,000 people. Now, Texas said, we're opening up and we are going to ride this out, and you can't be charged, and you can't be, businesses cannot be faulted if they, they have to allow you, if you want to wear a mask, you're welcome to, but if you don't want to, that's going to be, it's its own science experiment.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see what happens down there, but definitely, watching it on TV, it's alarming to see that many people, but in essence, it was more alarming to see not a lot of them wearing masks, right? So,
and I didn't get a chance to watch this game. I was watching a bit of that when they played the Yankees the other day, and things are quiet, things seem like what they should be, but then all of a sudden you end up in Texas, and I know, I don't know as a professional sports player, but the energy you get when you're at a game when there's lots of people, there's no doubt. But I guess time is going to tell and prove whether or not Texas was, a bit reckless.
Yeah.
And as we continue to think of our wheels as they continue to circle around, what have you learned this week about what's happening with the Chuckwagons?
Oh, yeah, the Chuckwagons, that they canceled 2 of their events. So I think Grand Prairie and Saskatoon. So, our hope is that WPCA will have their tourney, but who knows? At this rate, because, they depend on all of the events to give them sponsorship, give them money. So there's no purse money, there's no sponsorship out of 2 events that could leave some, hole or that needs to be fixed. But they're going to have to rely on other sponsors to come in. So it's a very expensive sport, especially when you're taking care of over 1,000 horses, right? So yeah, we'll see what happens.
And whoever's listening, you go ahead. I think a lot of our listeners are very supportive of the Chuckwagons. You want to send an email and you want to complain about the fact that, they're taking advantage of these animals. Folks, these owners, these family members, these Chuckwagon, the whole league, they take better care of their animals, I bet you, than you do. So, folks, don't go out there and start complaining to me, this is just so violent and they shouldn't allow that. Those animals want to run. And I know that there's a lot of studies out there to ensure that the health of those animals is kept as best they can. And again, these are the families that are putting their money up in order to take care of these animals and run these chucks.
Yeah, I mean, around the safety thing. I mean, certainly at one time they probably didn't even think of that because it just wasn't on their minds about safety. But yeah, definitely it is a dangerous sport for the riders, especially too, and the horses. And, it's a matter of taking care of them. But, a lot of these thoroughbreds who kind of retire from racing down south or on these tracks don't retire in the same fashion as a lot of people think. And this is an extra vehicle for them to actually, be more taken care of for later on in their life after they retire from thoroughbred racing. So,
and sometimes I've mentioned to people before, well, if it bothers you so much, why don't you go and adopt some of these horses yourself and just take them home? Well, I live in an apartment. Well, then I guess you just don't care enough now, do you? Otherwise, go get a piece of land, start getting 100 horses out there, and then you take care of them. And let's just see, you're going to continue to fall in love and you're going to respect those other people out there who are taking care of these animals and letting them, be a part of sport and being their own athlete. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll get some. I'm sure I'll get some kind of email response to that. You, folks, if you want to email us to make a comment, tsw@mat3.org. And we always appreciate all of your comments. We appreciate all your suggestions on things you'd like to hear us talk about. So, folks, once again, always thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because it means a lot to us. Lawrence, the new Metis. We talked about that last week a little bit, but I know we bantered around that there's more happening there in conversation.
Well, I mean, we've had this issue for, a long time about who are the new ones and who are the old ones, I guess you can call them, or who grew up around their culture. And me and yourself kind of growing up in that sort of circle. And then when people kind of attain their, membership later on in life, they kind of want to find who they are. But, sometimes the issue is, well, yeah, that's not an issue. The issue of finding himself is not an issue at all. It's all around identity, and it's about where they are in steps. But I guess one of the issues is a lot of people who are Métis or, even our First Nation cousins kind of know or see people that put themselves in these roles that Métis Nation members should actually be a part of. And, whether it's government, it's an institution, or if it's an industry position, they should really have a connection to the Métis Nation. And I'm not sure how you really address that, either probably through policy, I'm sure. But so government institutions and industry, and I say institutions as schools, understand, what those appointments are made to be. If it's reconciliation, that's great. But they should really have somebody who's connected to the Métis Nation in those roles. And if Métis Nation members like myself or anybody who's kind of walking through the doorways and see them kind of sitting there and going, well, who are they? That's usually a sign that they're not connected. And, the Métis Nation will benefit from these people who are sitting in those positions, because it's not a report back. It's not, but they do have a bit of a responsibility to come to you as a Métis Nation member, and who they are. And you can kind of say, how are things going over there? Everything's great. Okay, well then see you later, right? But if you don't see anybody you don't know sitting in those spots and they're making decisions on behalf of the Métis people, well, yes, a lot of the Métis Nation goes, well, who are they? And a lot of it are new Métis people, right? So, they're going through their journey. Well, then go through their journey, and we'll be supportive of that. But don't assume these leadership roles without, putting that wall between the nation and yourself, because that's only going to benefit you, right? At the end of the day.
Okay. So just because you jumped around, I wouldn't say you jumped around a little, but I just want to make sure that I get the narrative correct. So we see an individual who maybe has started to learn and identify, I'm Métis. Here's, they're interested in the journey. They're excited about that journey, but then they also have a role within industry or government. And so you're sort of, okay, they put their hand up and go, well, I'm Métis, and they're happy to represent, but yet they don't have a strong familiarity with where our current state of sort of the citizen and our direction of self-government and our cultural awareness. And because they're not introducing that into whatever work that they're trying to be involved with as representation, you sort of see that as the new Métis, where you need to connect if you're going to represent. Is that what you're expressing?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to throw out misrepresentation. I think it's just, they're not cognizant that, if this is a Métis role or an Indigenous role for an Indigenous person, it's not just because I'm working in a company and I'm Métis and I just put my hand up. These are jobs they apply for and contracts that they get that are for Indigenous people. Well, then they should go to that job with an understanding of, Indigenous folks, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and understand who they are. So when I sit in a meeting or, I'm introduced to their Indigenous relations officer, right, and I don't know who they are, and then I sort of find out that they haven't really been speaking correctly to the presidents and the CEOs, the ones who are talking to me, then I go, well, what is the purpose of that position?
Right. Gotcha. So on one side, maybe these employers or these agencies are theoretically doing the right thing. They're saying, well, we should have more representation and allow somebody to represent the Indigenous population. Again, not always just being specific to just Métis but having a Indigenous relation role. So they're kind of doing their job, and yet the individual who may apply for it is stepping into a role where they have a responsibility to share knowledge, but they don't really have any knowledge.
That's right.
Okay. I understand that.
Yeah, and so we see that as a gap. Like Métis Nation people see it as a gap, and then we call these companies on it, and then we see them moving. Okay, well, yeah, we get your point, and then they put somebody else there that doesn't know either again, right? So we see this recurring thing happening.
And I found on maybe one of the simplest side of that was a lot of times you'd attend an event or attend an academic event, and they'd do some land acknowledgement, and I would ask the person, hey, do you have any idea what your land acknowledgement meant? No idea.
Yeah.
They just said the words. And there's a gap there. You're right. That's the gap.
And that's called meaningful engagement. And that's what First Nation leaders and Métis leaders want. We want meaningful engagement and meaningful action.
Yeah.
You know, you can have all these meetings all you want, and you can write all these traditional land acknowledgements, but if you don't understand what they actually mean, well, then that's not meaningful to us, right? As an Indigenous group. So
I should write that on the wall behind me. You're right. Those are very, very important terms. Meaningful engagement and meaningful action. No.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you know, these TRC recommendations that came through about land acknowledgement and education and all these different ones, you know, the 94 calls to action, well, they actually mean stuff to Indigenous people.
Yeah.
But if that company is not kind of looking at it in the same frame of mind, well, then we kind of go, well, what's meaningful to us, right? And you want us to form a partnership, right, together? So yeah, it's a very interesting narrative that I kind of put in their face. And I think it's important, you know, as a leader, we have to show them that little mirror so they can see themselves.
Well, and that goes back to anything that I participate in, like any meeting, if it's not meaningful, when I do corporate work, Memphis group work, wildfire, satellite work, if all of a sudden I'm talking to somebody and I identify, they don't care. This is not meaningful. Therefore, I am not really here to participate any further. I'm not just trying to go through the motions. You know, people should be prepared. They should be interested. And it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I don't understand, but maybe now is not the time. Great. At least we can move forward. Otherwise, we end up wasting a lot of time.
Yeah, and a lot of, you know, artists out there are starting to create all this action because of the Boyden and Latimer and all those things that have happened about identity, and them taking Indigenous awards even and money away from Indigenous populations. And, you know, and they can't claim an ancestry link to being Indigenous. Well, then, yeah, it becomes a huge, huge problem, right? Yeah. And it should for your company.
And I think, and that leads us into just a short conversation about, we often talk about the impetus, the requirement to consult, but that doesn't go far enough. There is a duty to consult. They have a responsibility. Companies, government agencies, they have a duty to contact the Indigenous groups and say, we want you to be a part of this conversation. And that's, you're right, where it has to be meaningful.
Well, the turning point was in 1982, right? And people don't understand what that actual talks, you know, when they were introducing the natural resource transfer agreements, and they talked about, you know, the changes to Section 35. And prior to 1982, there was very little protection for Aboriginal people and their rights, right? And 1982 was the turning point. The Guerin case for First Nations kind of cemented that fiduciary responsibility. The Daniels decision in 2016 for the Métis. But, you know, it's so important that, we have to protect our Indigenous rights in this community, in this country. Otherwise, you know, we're going to have issues upon issue in Supreme Court. And you don't want to go there with, you know, as Canadians. And people are always talking about this separation of Western Canada. It ain't going to happen, you know, at least in Indigenous people's minds, because then we lose our rights.
Right.
If we do that. Right. So you're not going to get any support from Indigenous folks.
Yeah.
When it comes to separation.
We're already on our own path of trying to ensure that our connection with our community strengthens. And
Yeah,
that,
I mean, it took how 150
Constitution.
years to guarantee our survival as Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
We're not going to just end it because you feel like you're not included here in Western Canada. And I get that grievance. You're speaking to the choir here as Métis people about Western Canada. That's why we went to war against Canada. That's why we created the resistance against them, because we knew once they took over, we would lose our rights as people.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been trying to protect that for years.
Yeah, and like any group, it's a long, slow journey, and especially when you bring the courts in or bring any government in.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, the most important thing is that companies, institutions, and governments understand that we are protected people. As of 1982, it's Section 35. There's no hierarchy. There's no First Nations, Métis, and Inuit on different levels. We're all on the same level. You know what I mean? So
Right.
Yeah.
So the message there is meaningful engagement. Yeah.
That too, right? Yep.
Camping. Let's jump to our conversation. You look like you glamp all day long, Lawrence. Like that's, I assume you're making espressos.
I try to get outside at least for an hour of the day, at least in the sun. You got to hit the rays hit you.
Yeah.
But camping, yeah. I mean, I can't wait till that happens. But we all know the sites are going to be full this year.
Oh, there's no doubt. I hear nothing but talk from every trailer agency out there. Phenomenal. And they're even the ones to say, we're selling trailers. We don't even know where people are going to go. Try and fit onto Crown land if you can. I guess find a local farmer's field who maybe they'll allow you some space. Yeah, it's a nightmare for those families who are trying to figure out navigating the provincial parks to find a place. Yeah, we're at a unique time. It's a unique challenge. And wildfires, right? We're already starting to see the rise. And again, my company does reports, and we're doing some now about how weather and topography are also impacting our climate change when it comes to, it's just seemingly how more frequent and challenging wildfires are to communities. So, you tie that in with just wanting to go on a nice camping trip. We also have to take care of our land when you're camping, right? You can't be careless. You can't be reckless. Do your job. Folks, do your job out there. When you put that fire out, you make sure it's out.
Yeah, well, especially this time of year, it's grass fire season because the winds get so high. And yeah, you got to be extra careful in the spring.
Oh, with my career background, it still drives me nuts when I see people throwing cigarette butts out. Why can those people not be arrested for just disgusting habit? Folks, if you want to send an email about how disgusting it is, or you're a smoker, you're upset that you've got to throw, but I don't want to smoke. I don't want to leave the ash and butt in my car. Oh, but you don't have any trouble throwing it out onto the side of the road and then watching it as it starts a grass fire. So go ahead, you send those emails, folks.
Yeah. Well, we do have a smoking cessation program here at the M&A if people want to be a part of.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. Folks, as I go off of my usual rants and Lawrence does the appropriate thing of steering us back into our proper conversation, yes, make sure you look into the tobacco reduction programs. There's great youth programs out there. There's another program out coming provincially for your kids for sports. Thank you, Lawrence, for this conversation that we have so we can hit on a lot of these things. Harvesting is still a strong conversation and people still applying for the opportunities. Folks, just because you may not necessarily go out and hunt animals doesn't mean that you don't want to keep that history of our culture going, because it might be somebody else in your family. So, engage with our community. I know Isla, for example, does a lot of the senior events and really connects a lot of our seniors. We have, strong youth teams. I think we're poised. We're connecting. And Lawrence, thank you for being a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we got to all 15,000 members, but we don't. It's kind of, it would be, I think, pretty tough for us to actually reach that many people at once.
Can there be a law that they have to listen to us? Maybe that's something we should send out to the province, that They have to listen to us. But I know we have some great initiatives that are coming up of working with some of our very close Métis partners about scholarship things that are happening. I think I'm excited. We're going to have some very interesting guests who've been provided with a lot of opportunities. I'm excited as we move forward. Again, I'm always learning, Lawrence. Always learning.
Well, you know what? You can bring that special resolution to the floor at our General Assembly this August and see what people say, that it's mandatory that they listen to the squeaky wheel.
It will be the squeaky wheel listening legal requirement. I don't know what the acronym is for there.
I'll help you write it, but you got to stand at the mic and field the questions.
And we'll put it on buttons and t-shirts. So folks, when we get those buttons and t-shirts, I'll make sure that you get a chance to order one. So folks, from here, all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, from the front end of the president, Lawrence Gervais, to the middle of Ross, Memphis, Pambrun, to our strong backside of Jason, who manages to put all of this stuff together on our weekly podcast. Thank you from the Squeaky Wheel. Thank you for listening. Folks, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, tip your waitresses, and keep the squeaky wheel turning.